I have There you go. So you get to the good part. Well, for the folks who weren't able to be here, we'll have the recording from here on out. Okay. So that is what happens for the next little bit. We'll definitely be out 8 or just a couple of minutes late. But as long as we're good to go, I'm just going to move in for the next little while. All right. So, um, hi. Here's a question for you. I'm going to launch a poll. And I want to just ask you really quickly, do you prefer the concept of burial or cremation? This is just a yes or no option. And I just want you to go down to the spot where, Amanda, you can see it? Good, perfect. Okay, it's on. Um, so we have a slight, oh, we're getting close to 50-50. We're really sticking at 50-50. Oh, and a ton of us are in. Okay, I'm gonna end it here with actually 53 53 in favor of burial and 47 in favor of cremation. And I have to say that in Canada we are kind of out of sync here. That is actually the first time I've ever asked that in a whole bunch of different situations where we had something that was so even. In Canada, our stats are 74% for cremation as the preferred method of disposition, and burial being about, 20-ish, 25% of that. In BC here, it's actually almost 90% who generally prefer cremation, right? I have one more that I want to ask you before we really launch in. In our lives, all right, what I want to ask you is, do you think about environmental concerns or sustainability issues in your daily life? All right, this is multiple choice. You could only pick one and the other. I would like you to answer me with as many of these as you wish. Do you do nothing? Do you try and inform yourselves? Here, you can see the list before you, okay? And you can hopefully, Amanda, are you able to pick more than one?
Mm, I think so.
Good, okay, because I had selected more than one, but I'm picking on you because you're the biggest face on my screen right now. All right, good. We've got about half of folks. I'll wait until it's well past half. And you know what? I'm going to tell you, with already 2/3 of people answering, literally no one has said, I don't do anything. All right.
Mhm.
Great. Okay, we'll stop there. That's where I stopped before. So I'll end the poll. Oh no, you guys are into it. Okay, I'll wait for another second. I'll share it in just a second. But folks are supporting local businesses. They're striving to lighten their ecological footprint. They're minimizing meat consumption or shopping at farmers markets and finding ways to get to know people who produce their food. These are things that all of us are doing in our day-to-day lives, day in and day out, to think about our environmental footprint. Each of us, oh, and I just wish that I could just holler on all of you to tell me what the other is, because there's folks here who have the other button, and I think that's where some of the absolute magic lies. But I just want to tell you that here's the thing that I am just so crazy passionate about. We don't, oh, you're about to meet my cat. This is terrible. It happens all the time. Hi. Yes. Here's the thing is that we don't know what we don't know on this front, which is why folks like me and Amanda do stuff like this, because we really want folks to understand that there are things that you can do at end of life as well and after death. And the reality is that we don't necessarily, I'm just going to have to move this buddy because there we go. Thank you very much. The reality is that we don't necessarily understand exactly what our options are because we live in a death denying society and nobody likes to talk about it. And so there's 20 something of you sitting in this room tonight on a gorgeous summer night who are willing to talk about it from practically coast to coast. So I am super, super grateful to you for that. And what I'm going to start with is just a really quick rundown on the part of the reason that I asked you what you think of in terms of preferred methods of disposition is that a lot of people think that cremation is a greener alternative to burial. People in this crowd obviously have a little bit of a different way of thinking about this stuff. And you know that maybe cremation is not as green as you might have thought it was, or the general public thinks it is. But the situation before us is simply this: conventional burial and conventional cremation, so flame-based cremation, are basically the same level of ecological damage to our planet. And that ecological level of damage is actually quite high. Some people think, well, maybe I'll get around this by donating my body to science. But what people don't understand with the whole body science donation is that that is not itself a method of disposition. It is actually just delaying disposition. And B, when the disposition occurs, in most provinces, the disposition is still flame-based cremation. The other thing that people don't know about donating a body to science is that, well, it's not that they don't know, it's just that they might not have ever thought this through. How will a body continue to be used? Right? The body will only continue to be used if it is aggressively embalmed. And I am a green mortician, but I am not anti-embalming per se. I am just anti-always embalming. I am not anti-embalming. A perfect example of an excellent use of embalming is the preservation of the body so that it can be used for scientific needs. But it's not a particularly green alternative. And folks just have this natural assumption that it is. So here I am busting myths and moving and shaking things up a little bit for you. So donating a body to science, really not all that green. With conventional burial, some of the reasons that we run into the environmental footprint being so high that folks don't think about, mostly people think about the land use. And again, I'm this modern mortician who is not anti-cemeteries. I actually think cemeteries are incredible spaces, and they are in no way wasted spaces, even conventional cemeteries with their with their green manicured lawns. They are incredible spaces that can actually build community and be at the heart and the center of a community. But what folks often don't think of are the cement that's involved, the caskets that are built often very, very, very far away, and using sometimes wood that would much better be left as trees. The heavy machinery that's used to keep all of these grounds in a kind of a nice way of looking and whatnot. The pesticides, all of that is sometimes just overlooked. And we have this idea that burial is better than cremation. Well, it is if it's green burial that we're talking about. Green burial is something that we are extraordinarily lucky to have here in BC and throughout much of Canada, but not all of Canada. All right. For example, in Prince Edward Island at this moment, there's literally not one green burial spot that's available to the general public. There are 5 principles to green burial. No embalming. All right, it's a different conversation, but it's an important one. Direct earth burial. So you don't even need a casket. You don't need something that was manufactured very far away and shipped all the way across the world. You can actually simply wrap or even theoretically leave the body completely unwrapped. Ecological restoration is a huge part of green burial. once the green burial has been completed, what happens is the surface of every grave, after allowing for a little bit of settling, it's planted with locally sourced and indigenous plants, right? And it uses ground cover and shrubs and trees. And the plantings will normally be done sort of in a pre-established manner, but what's going to happen is it's going to optimize, like a green roof in downtown Vancouver. It's going to actually just optimize the balance and the enhancement and the integration of the larger ecosystem. All right. Communal memorialization is another principle of the 5 principles of green memorial, green burial. I mean, and so what you have there is, instead of individual headstones, which are really difficult to transport and are usually made of concrete. Unfortunately, now they're not made of some of those beautiful stones and whatnot. There's a lot of ecological impact just on the singular memorialization that people don't even think about. And by having a communal memorialization, such as a wall, and nothing impeding the space of a green cemetery, you get this incredible situation where you're actually allowing the previous state, the ecological restoration, to get deeper and not be intruded upon, right? And then finally, the 5th principle is the optimized land use. So what that means is that in a conventional cemetery, you're going to have rows, and you're going to have these big concrete liners that go in, and then you put the casket inside, and then you put the lid on top, and then you put the dirt on. And obviously that's going to mean that you can only use certain amounts before you get to the roads, and then you are going to have to stop. And then now in an optimized land use green burial situation, what's going to happen is that you will be able to maximize the interment capacity over the years, and you can actually have reuse of graves and all that kind of thing, right? So we have this incredible and beautiful green option for burial, but we don't have it for cremation, even though it exists. So I'll just ever so briefly, before I turn it over to you, love, I'll just speak for a second about alkaline hydrolysis, which is currently not. Oh, I'm noticing some folks are having some streaming issues. Yeah. I'm sorry about that. It's totally fine on my end, and I'm not getting any low. Sorry about that, friends. Yeah, that's probably the best way. Turn off the thing. That's unusual, because normally I get a big message that says you're experiencing some issues. So my apologies. Better now? Okay, no video helps. Good. Glad to know. We'll keep ours on though, I guess. Sorry about that, friends. Usually I learn about that. So with alkaline hydrolysis, this is not currently legal in all parts of Canada, but it is legal in several provinces, including yours, Amanda. And the beauty here is that the incredibly negative impact of the retorts, which use natural gas to heat to 1800 Celsius and burn for hours and hours and hours, the impact of one single burning, one single cremation, is the same as you getting in your car, me getting in my car and driving all the way across to go hang out with Amanda for a night and then driving back. That is one single cremation. And most people don't think of cremation as a negative impact on the environment because they don't see the land pieces. Oh, I'm just going to do a quick thing where, actually, as co-host, are you able to do that, love? Yeah? Can you do the, thank you. So one thing to consider is that many, oh, I'm just gonna see if I can mute all. Okay, mute, here we go, sorry. Okay, so we had some background noise there. So one thing that folks don't consider often is that the problem with cremation, which doesn't have the associated land use, is that it uses so much energy in the actual act of disposition that it that is kind of hidden. And the reason it's hidden is very few of us actually witness that act. But the simple fact is, it is enormously damaging to our environment. And there are ways to actually mitigate that environmental impact that aren't crazy, unreal things like, I don't know, I'm going to pick on mushroom suits and tree pods for a second, which simply don't exist. They are literally lures for investors. They're kind of sexy. They're a little hot. They're exciting ideas, and they might get us thinking and talking about disposition, which is great because in a death-denying society, we want more of that, right? But the simple fact of the matter is they're not real. And that is a problem. So what I want to do is I want to turn it over to you, my love, for a couple of minutes to talk to us about the environmental impact of cremation that I've just touched on here, and specifically the impact of cremated remains, which is the other thing that no one thinks about. And to tell the truth, until not too recently, I didn't give a lot of attention to either. But I can tell you that as a mortician, the vast number of us, we actually take, and you probably have the exact numbers, but we actually take our cremated remains with no intention of placing them in a cemetery. What do we have the intention of doing? Go for it, my child.
Sure. Thanks, Krista. Yeah, it's funny because when my colleague Lauren and I started our journey, our adventure of Awake, there was a period last summer where I was picking up the phone and just cold calling a bunch of crematoriums and asking them questions. And one of the things that I would discuss with them, obviously, was the impact and the toxins in the actual remains themselves, in the ashes. And all of them that I spoke with just said, yeah, of course. What? People don't know this. People don't realize that. But as you mentioned, because it's kind of hidden, we don't have that firsthand experience. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to share my screen, because Krista did ask me to put together just a couple slides, and it'll be helpful for talking points anyways, and helpful for you guys to see some numbers. So we're talking right now about ashes. So the question of how do cremated remains, so Krista discussed the process of cremation, the disposition method itself. With all of that said, we know that 73, almost 75%, 3/4 of Canadians choose cremation as their
And
final
90%
disposition.
here, just saying.
And in BC, it's, yeah. In the last census or the last study, it was 87 and rising. So about 90, yeah. So with all of that said, a lot of us do not choose to inter those remains in a cemetery or in a specific place. Many of us have those ashes with us in our homes. Many of us scatter them in green spaces. And the question is, with 75% of 310,000 Canadians creating about 20 cups of ashes per person per year, what is actually in that powdered ash and what is it doing to the environment as we release it into the world? And how does it impact our soil? So before we can actually look more closely at how do those remains impact the soil, the first question we have to actually ask ourselves is, what are they? Because it is really worth noting that they are not ashes. So they're not actually anything like wood ash. And I have spoken with a number of university laboratories in the past year to do some collaboration for some academic research together. And at first, they were starting to toss me around to their departments and laboratories that specialize in forestry and in burning of ashes. And when we had the more in-depth conversation, they were actually quite astonished, even at that really high academic level, and they completely changed tacks. So they're nothing like wood ash at all. So what they actually are is they're a powderized form of a sterilized bone matter. And with that said, the powder itself is highly, highly alkaline. So our independent studies that we've conducted have them at a very base level of 11.8. And it is very worth noting that that places them right smack dab in the range of a bleach product. So when we're talking about returning ashes to the earth or mixing them into the earth, it is very similar to essentially dumping a bleach product right into the ground. And just as a side note, for a plant, whether it's an indigenous species growing in the forest or it's a plant we have in our home or something in our garden, for a plant species generally to grow, they need a 5.5 to a 7 pH approximately. So we're way out of range for that, over double. They also contain 200, sometimes up to 2,000 times more sodium than a plant can actually survive in. And some of you, given that so many of us do choose cremation,
not in this group, of course, but
pardon?
Not in this group, of course. Only 50%
well, 50%,
in this group, but yeah, but still
50%,
usually.
And chances are many of our loved ones.
Yes, yes.
So some of you may have experienced this. You may have had loved ones who have, taken a pinch of their loved one's ashes and thought, she really loved her garden and tried to mix them in with the garden. And it's a very spiritual, very significant act that we as humans, I think, are just drawn to do. And then it's very heartbreaking when that rose bush or that apple tree or whatever the plant was dies and we don't know why. So the sodium is another massive factor. So the sodium actually causes the plant's roots to stop growing, and it begins to poison the entirety of the plant as it absorbs that sodium. Anyone else here who has gardened like me and is anti-pesticides, same here, you may have actually used salt, the sodium, to kill weeds in your garden or in the cracks in your driveway. And that is essentially what ashes are doing. So how do they actually impact the soil? That's what they are. How are they impacting it? So the sterilization is because they're sterile, they don't actually biodegrade. And I have a photo I'll actually show you, which might be a little nitty gritty for some people. So just like caution. But as a scientist, I find it very fascinating. So being sterile, there's none of that healthy bacteria, those microorganisms that we all talk about having like healthy pre and probiotics in our guts. There's nothing in those ashes that is going to help the surrounding soil to penetrate, to work them into the earth. So graves that have actually been exhumed decades later have shown the ashes still sitting there. Basically, they mix with the moisture of the soil and they become what looks like cement, like in a cement mixer in the ground, and they will just sit there forever. That high level of the pH and the sodium that's found in the ashes themselves, because it's just sitting there, will begin to leach, and it leaches and leaches and leaches into the ground for years and years and years. So it's not just that immediate space surrounding it that we're talking about being impacted. It's the vicinity. It's the vicinity of where the ashes are placed in the ground. And again, these are some of the details of what that looks like, the signs that you will see in a plant. You can see it sometimes within days, and then the impact just worsens over the years. So what our solution is our colleagues in the States, who are our research and development partners, they began research 12 years ago now, trying to figure out what can we actually do to mitigate this, because people are choosing it. And there's all kinds of reasons why, whether it is more cost effective, whether it is a family tradition, whether it's a spiritual belief, people are choosing it. It's a reality. So how do we help to make that a healthier choice for the world and something that we personally feel better about and can stand behind?
Well,
so,
and Amanda, I'm just going to interject here that the big thing for me around alkaline hydrolysis, which I know is something that your product can actually integrate as well, is that people often say, well, why are you so excited about this option instead of just really doubling down on green burial? And I will work, or for example, human composting, which is also known as natural organic reduction, right? Amazing, very forward thinking options, but often cost prohibitive and
Right.
not commonly understood or not commonly chosen. Cremation is only becoming more commonly chosen.
Yeah.
And so I think that like I'm just sorry, I'm interrupting only to amplify, but I just think that what happens here is that we simply understand and and feel integrated and connected somehow to the concept of cremation, which is amazing because 100 years ago it was definitely for Westerners not a thing that we were all that into at all, but now we really are. So why go against it? Which is a big part of why I have you here tonight too. So there you
Thanks, Krista.
go.
Yeah, so essentially what we have is we have an internationally patented mixture that is combined with cremation ashes. And then basically they can be buried, planted immediately. They can be used for scattering. As Krista mentioned, we also mix with aquamated remains and it's equally as effective, our studies have shown. And we've developed this mix working with a couple of different academic institutions, some world leading soil scientists, and essentially over 11 years of research, every single plant that's been planted with ashes using our mix, which is called Let Your Love Grow, has been effective, has been healthy. And the way that we do that, it is a completely organic mix. That we're able to neutralize those pH levels. We're able to reverse the salinity of that sodium content, and basically infuse the ashes with a really specific blend of microbial cultures and microorganisms that encourage the surrounding earth to penetrate them and work them into the ground. So I did mention I have a photo.
I've seen it.
Again,
It's not that horrible. No, we're not.
I love
Yeah,
it.
yeah. I don't think people need to be afraid.
Study conducted with families' consent. So we wanted to actually show what's happening under the ground because we don't get to see that. We don't get to see that as humans. So we have 3 sets of ashes that were buried at the exact same time. 2 of them in these biodegradable urns, and 1 of them in a standard plastic vessel. So 6 months after interment, if you dig them up, this is what you're going to see. So you can see in 6 months, as an example, the ashes are still there. Whereas when you're able to infuse them with those cultures and neutralize those toxins, they actually really naturally work into the ground. And the really nice thing about this that you can see actually is, and I've had a couple people ask us, is that you can remediate. So if you have already buried your loved one in your garden and are experiencing some of those effects, you can actually fix that. It's never too late. So that's the nice thing. Do you have any other specific questions, Krista, about the science before we move on from here?
No. Don't let not always a hugely science crowd. So
Okay.
so move on to the joy there.
Okay. Yeah. So again, as I mentioned earlier, what I personally love about this option, as Krista knows, it really upset me that those 73% of Canadians who choose cremation did not have a green option. I just found that absolutely atrocious. To your poll earlier, Krista, I am one of these people who actively looks in my daily life for ways to be more sustainable, to be a more conscious consumer, and to have a net positive impact on the planet with my life. And the thought that that final act of my life could not be positive if I chose cremation was really upsetting to me.
Well, I think it's just important to know that for so many of us, the only option available that is even remotely green in across Canada is the green burial option. I am an enormous proponent of green burial, and one of my dearest friends and colleagues is like the vice president of the Green Burial Association of Canada. I live and breathe these values, but it is cost prohibitive for some, and for others, it is simply not an option. There are, like I said, entire provinces where that option does not even exist. And so the reality is that your options often across Canada are simply conventional burial or conventional cremation. And we're not going to be able to change that quickly. Like I mentioned, tree pods and mushroom suits and promession, freeze drying, they don't exist. They're sexy and they capture the attention, and they have some great memes that come out, and do not send them to me. But they don't actually exist, and
They
so
exist. They're
we
just
need,
not
yeah.
proven to be effective.
Well, they're proven to be scalable in remotely. Like promession has never been able to get, which is the freeze drying, has never been able to get beyond even the most beta, the most alpha of beta testing. So it's simply, they can theoretically exist, but they cannot commercially exist. And how does that help us? How does that help us when we're dealing with the loss of our parent, or the loss or our anticipated own death or anything? It doesn't. It's literally pie in the sky. So we need to work with what we have. And at some point in the not too distant future, we will be able to manage probably natural organic reduction, which sits somewhere in between the two cost ranges. At
Right.
least down in the States it does, but it's still going to be something that is very limited in scope. For especially for the size of Canada, the ability for everyone to have access to this just simply won't exist. So totally didn't mean to derail you, but there you go.
No, as we said, we're super conversation based, which I much
Yeah.
prefer. And I had two thoughts also, just building on your points, Krista. One of which being that we have to work with the reality of today. And there are a number of things in this lifetime that I would love to look at the next generation and say, maybe in your time, maybe it will be in your time. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be an option for me in this lifetime, or frankly, that my loved ones who've already passed away can access those options, right? The reality is, in the meantime, our loved ones are still naturally going to pass away, and we are obviously naturally going to pass away, and we still want to have a final act, a final impact on the planet that we can stand behind and feel really good about. So how can we do that?
Mm-hmm.
And the other thought that I wanted to share was just that for Lauren and I, it's really important that we are always culturally aware and culturally inclusive. And we recognize that there are a number of different cultures that historically, for millennia, have chosen cremation, whether they're open fire cremation or what have you. And
That's
we
not, yeah,
respect that. And
totally.
yeah, and we want to help people to follow their cultural traditions while also acting on their contemporary values.
Yeah, I think
So
that's
that's something
really,
that's very important for us.
yeah. Yeah, very beautiful. With that in mind, actually, a number of years ago, I was at and had the incredible privilege of being in Varanasi on the Ganges River and witnessing some of the open pyres. It was a number of years ago, so it was before I was actually in this line of work, and I remember really being struck by the smoke and what I could so obviously see as an environmental impact, which is something that most of us do not see across Canada. The 74% of us that choose this, it's there are few crematoria, and they are often in out of the way places, and it is definitely for many of us not something that we go and witness on a regular basis. So my question around that, or my point around this, I guess, for you to pick up on is, what are we doing when we hide it all away like that, right? Like
Mhm.
what does that mean to us environmentally even? Does that make sense?
Mhm. Mhm. I think, I mean, I focus on the ground. So
Mm,
my awareness of the science in terms of air pollution is not nearly as comprehensive. But what I can tell you is that a number of cemeteries and burial grounds are starting to adopt scattering gardens for a couple of different reasons. And, you know, if we're giving people the benefit of the doubt, let's say that environmental impact is one of the considerations, in addition to, of course, optimizing their space. We worked with, or our team worked with, a scattering garden in Australia. And what they were finding, they wanted to keep it beautiful, of course, for their clients, and they couldn't understand why the grass was chronically dying. All of their expensive landscaping, beautiful plants were very unhealthy, were needing to be replaced all of the time. So we did some soil studies on the breakdown of what was in their soil, and actually found that under a microscope, it was more comparable to concrete than it was to a growing medium.
Wow.
So we remediated the entire garden because nothing would grow there.
And that was the place where, didn't they have to spend like tens of thousands of dollars on replanting the trees?
That was another space in the UK. In the UK, 150,000 pounds annually to replace the loved ones' memorial trees because they didn't want to break their clients' hearts.
With a dead apple tree.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely a reality. All right. All right. No, now I did hear you say that your focus, and I totally recognize this. I'm not a scientist. I often joke that I'm such a Canadian when introduce myself. It's like I'm not a financial planner. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a counselor. I'm not, I am just a simple mortician. Certainly not a scientist. But water, can you tell me anything about scattering in water, or is that out of I would just kind of assume that if it's like pouring bleach into the dirt, pouring our cremated remains into the water may also not be a very sound idea theoretically.
Yeah, it's cool that you raised that point because to our knowledge, studies have not been done on that. And that is something we're currently in conversations with Lakehead University about studying for the first time in Canada. Because the effects will obviously be different in saltwater, freshwater, running water, still water. It's going to be quite an intensive study, but we're really, really looking forward to it.
Oh, I think that's amazing. See, that is very forward-thinking work. I know I took you off track there. Do you have a couple more slides that you need to get through? Because I also want to get to ceremony.
Yeah, sure. Actually, I can probably transition us there. Let me see here. That's what we do. There's that. Yeah, so I think this will be a nice bridge between what we're talking about and the ceremony side of things. So oftentimes when people do choose cremation, it is because you're in a state of trauma, frankly, in that grief, and choosing something that is simple at the time is just most palatable, most doable for your mental state. And it almost lets you put a pin in that decision. So you know that you will lay them to rest at some point, but you're not 100% sure how yet. You're waiting for the right time and the right opportunity. So what I like about being able to return them to soil, return them to earth with Let Your Love Grow, is you can wait days after a passing or decades later. We had a really lovely email from a woman in BC recently whose husband had sat on her bedside dresser for 5 years, and she just wasn't ready to part with him yet. And then when she learned that she was able to return him to soil, she planted him in a maple tree on her back garden in a planter. So she sits with him every morning. It's lovely. So returning to that ceremonial piece, I think acknowledging their life, honoring their life, and also helping your own grief and your own healing is very important also when we consider not only our disposition, but our entire end of life plan. And it's nice to have options, and it's nice for your family to have options. So whether that means that you need to keep them close in like a plant that you can keep at home with you that lives on your bedside table, or spread or scatter them in a conservation area in the Rockies, or plant them in your flower bed in the backyard.
Yeah,
I
and still be
think,
able to grow your lettuce. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what. Unshare your screen. Let's talk for a couple of minutes about ceremony. Then I really
Mm,
picked up on what you said at the beginning there about how often people are making these decisions very quickly. I
yeah,
work with people, and of course, it's like one of my missions is to help people think about and plan for that inevitability. And many people that I work with, probably way more than the people in this room tonight, pick cremation intentionally,
mhm,
and they do so for a number of reasons, but cost is often one of those reasons.
mhm.
And the other reason is the ceremony of what they think of as the scattering later.
Yes.
Okay. And that beauty, that the beauty of choosing cremation is that you actually have dealt with the disposition. And so there's not this intense need to move quickly. With a burial, honestly, you really should be doing that within 3 weeks, right? With a
Yeah.
cremation, you can actually do the rest of the ceremonies 3 weeks, 3 years, 3 months, 30 years later.
Yeah.
And so I think that what is really key is that in disposition and green disposition options, we need to keep in mind that the disposition piece, we have very limited choices available to us here in Canada. Right now, we have green burial as the very height of the sort of the most green and least impactful option for pure disposition. We have alkaline hydrolysis available in 4 provinces and 1 territory, not making a whole lot of movement in the other provinces or territories at the moment. Natural organic reduction, also known as human composting, is not even on most politicians' agendas, unfortunately, and it has even less public understanding than alkaline hydrolysis, which is already a pretty limit, like it's already this big, and so when you go down to natural organic reduction, it's even smaller. The other ones that I always pick on don't really exist commercially, so we don't even need to waste time. And science, whole body science donation, not a green option at all, like at all, even though people often think that it really can be. Um, that's just disposition.
Mhm.
Ceremony is so incredibly important, and there are ways, or service, or whatever you want to call it, there are ways to green our ceremony, not just our disposition. And it can be as small as, so my mom, I'm just going to be personal for a second. My mom, little sweet little Ukrainian Catholic kind of lady, and her, I think it was 1995 when she pre-needed, and she did not pick one limousine. She picked 2 limousines to take her family to the service, and a lead car. And she had this whole idea about a bunch of stuff that I got to tell you, not that green.
Mhm.
And over the years, I've been able to nudge her out of some of those things. So, one of the things that I've loved is this emergence of hybrid events. And that was, of course, something that happened in COVID times, right? But we actually come to a place now where people who used to get on a plane and come all the way across the world to do something incredibly important, they were forced for a little while to only do it this other way. But then this other way got good and got meaningful and got impactful. And all of a sudden, it becomes truly another option. And
Mhm.
so I want to leave a little bit of time for questions, because I know with green work there is always so much in the question arena that we're never able to touch on in our work together. But I just want to sort of leave it by saying, let's never just end at the disposition. Let's also consider all of the other little pieces too.
Mhm.
Right? Fair? All right.
Mhm.
Friends, I know a bunch of you had to turn off cameras, but I would warmly invite you to turn back on microphones and/or uh, hold up hands, or really whatever works for you in terms of letting me know if you had any questions about what we've talked about in this last little bit. We've got a few minutes left so that we can still end on time. And we'll just be quiet for a moment to see if anything comes up.
Thank you, Bruce, for sharing your knowledge of concrete mixed with water.
Bruce has some inside knowledge in this realm.
To give you an idea that if you cannot avoid it, you must isolate the water and have it stand separate from its sources for at least 48 hours if concrete is introduced, and you have to test prior, each way. So yeah, it's a very small amount has a drastic effect.
That's a really good comparator.
Amanda, is your product available easily enough for additives? Like for scatterings or like to help the human remains?
Yeah, so we actually just launched in Canada. We just launched in April. So
but they ship everywhere, Bruce, even to Main Island.
Young, so we ship across Canada now from Barrie, Ontario. Yeah.
And one of the really lovely things is actually they can accommodate just a small amount or the entire, because remember, Bruce, you and I talked about literally how much is left over after a cremation. It's pounds, pounds and pounds, 7 probably pounds. And in order to neutralize that much, you actually need quite a bit. Is it about 3 times as much, Amanda?
We use a 3-to-1 ratio.
Yeah, 3-to-1 ratio. Yeah, and so you could also have enough to put a little Christmas poinsettia in. So it's quite a range. It's really lovely. And actually, it is super important for us that these are informational events, not sales events. But at the same time, we will send out to everyone like an info kit, so that if there's anything that is interesting to you, you can connect directly with our, with Amanda or with me or whatever. All right. So
just connecting dots between this question and then Bruce, your feedback earlier on the water mixed with the concrete and the isolation. So specifically for scattering, I just want to make sure we note this. Specifically for scattering, we recommend that when the ashes are mixed with the mix, you wait 90 to 120 days before doing the scattering, just because you really want to make sure those microorganisms and the healthy bacteria are infused into the ashes before they're scattered and separated in the air. Whereas planting and burial, they're in the ground, so you can use it immediately.
I've got a question, Amanda. I'm wondering, with alkaline hydrolysis, my internet connection might be real bad. With alkaline hydrolysis, are the cremated remains any less toxic because they haven't been burned to a crisp?
That was exactly Krista's question to me the very first time we met, funny enough. Great minds think alike. So I did look into this, Krista, by the way.
Thank you.
So you're very welcome. So they're very comparable. However, the alkaline hydrolysis remains, the sodium level is definitely less. The sodium is not quite that high. The pH is the exact same.
I had a question in the chat about how long we think before BC adopts alkaline hydrolysis, and I would just like to say that everyone in this room needs to help me, because I am pushing a very big rock uphill, my friends. And if you have lawyer friends, if you have lobbyist friends, if you have connections that I need, trust me, I have the energy, but what I need is the bodies, and I need those damn signatures. Unfortunately, what happens here is that these kind of, I'll just say it, these sexier petitions get a lot of attention, but they are not legal petitions that can be presented on the floor of the BC or any legislature across Canada. And so the one that is on the Aquamation BC, and I'll put it in the chat here, and it'll also go out in the list afterwards. The one that is there, not particularly sexy, sounds really boring, legally presentable, and we do not have anywhere near enough anywhere near enough signatures yet. So please, it is like literally the one thing. If you want to sound a little crazy at a dinner party and start talking about death, do it for me, okay? And do it for alkaline hydrolysis, because we can still support our good friend Amanda with the scattering afterwards. But gosh, if we had a greener option, what an amazing opportunity for us, hey? Aquamationbc.ca. There you go. That's where it is. Folks, we were 1 minute over. That was my fault because of my my quote helpfulness at the beginning. Amanda and I have both said that we're fine to stay for a few minutes afterwards, but I really want to be respectful of your time as well. So what I'm going to do is I'll pull together a formal closing and a formal gratitude and enormous thanks for your attention this hour, especially with the scattered start. But I'm just so grateful that there were 20 people that wanted to spend an hour on this beautiful evening talking about this different stuff and learning about these different things. When I first understood the impact of cremated remains and the environmental impact of cremated remains, I already got the environmental impact of the cremation itself. But when I started to understand this, I was like, well, who's going to fix this? And not even 2 weeks later, I met Amanda. So sometimes you just have to put it out there, right? And I just want to really invite you to just keep putting it out there, and please keep coming to things like this. Keep being willing to be brave and be honest and be ready and be willing to think about the one thing that we all have in common. I am so enormously grateful for this hour that you spent with me. For people who need to go ahead, go with love. But if anybody does want to stay and ask a few more questions, we'll keep the recording on, and you'd be so very welcome to just hang around with us too. Or you can just slip out into the beautiful evening ahead. And hearts are appreciated. Yes. Oh, you're so welcome. Oh, thank you, darling. Oh, I would give you a big hug back too. I can't wait to be doing this in person again soon. What I am going to do, it was kind of something you signed off on when you signed up for. I am going to send out a little info thing. It'll have Aquamation BC. It'll have Amanda's info, Awake-Afterlife info. It'll have a simple little sheet that I've put together about green burial and a few other of the only very few existing options that we do have available to us, and you're welcome to share that widely. All right, so thank you. I'm sorry our internet
welcome to
was
contact me at any time too. By the way,
Amanda, just throw
social.
yourself in the thing before everybody leaves. Yeah. And you're so welcome. Goodbye, love. I always feel like at the end of a Zoom meeting, it's like those people who stand right at the back of the room and then just slip out, right? So I love it when we have a minute to actually. Oh, there's Charlie. Bye. Charlie was my savior tonight. She was the one who told me about my terrible mistakes. So
I'm a millennial. I just have it in me.
Yeah.
Amanda, I just wanted to say I'm from Dundas, actually, and my sister who passed away last year, she passed away in Barrie, and we're trying to figure out what to do with her ashes. And I really would love to build a big garden and get everybody together and plant. Do you have a storefront that you work from in Barrie, or is it all an online store?
We are building our first office in my beautiful business partner's basement. So we don't have a storefront, but funny enough, speaking of Dundas, what I've been thinking of, Charlie, is, do you know the green environmental store in Dundas right beside the bakery downtown? Yeah. So there are some of these very green eclectic stores that are not funeral homes that I've been thinking about chatting with, because I think the conversation doesn't necessarily start always in a funeral home per se.
It shouldn't.
Yeah.
As a
yeah.
mortician, they're not going to be open to it. So
Mhm.
So I've been thinking about chatting with them. But honestly, if you're in Dundas, I'd be very happy to just meet with you.
Yeah, yeah, I'd love that. That'd be great. Okay.
yeah, I think that's just spectacular. Like I can see a time when these it sounds totally nuts, but I can see a time when stuff like this is available in Home Depot. You know, just down aisle 12. Thank you very much. And why? Because, like, why not? Because the actual cremated remains are not there, so you don't need a licensed professional engaged. You add the cremated remains, and I don't know if you haven't approached Home Depot yet, Amanda. Let me get on that for you. Okay?
I've thought about it because gardeners, we have a lot of really great conversations with gardeners, and the other side of things that I didn't touch on today, slightly different topic, but is our pet line. Because if you're a crazy pet person like me, you want to be buried with your pets. And all of my pets were cremated, and I have their ashes, and I want us to be together.
Yeah.
So I've actually also thought, I wonder if we should be talking to pet stores one day.
Totally. In Bosley's or Teasel or something too. I'm just saying. Think big, my dear.
But yeah, so Charlie, email me, okay? Yeah, email me and we'll totally chat. The garden sounds like a really beautiful idea.
And Charlie, can I ask, you might have, because Charlie was in one of the classes that I've done recently. So I'm just wondering, did you already know about the environmental impact of cremated remains, or yeah?
Well,
Okay.
I follow you. I'm one of your
I
your
guess
main
okay, yeah.
groupies.
You are my loyal following. I don't mean to brag, but I have 4 followers, so I'm. No, but that's just really interesting to me, because like the concept around, it was actually Amanda who gave me the number. It was I've already known the Canadian number, 74-ish% of Canadians choose to be cremated. But like, of those who choose to be cremated, well over 60% say their intention with the cremated remains is to do something with them in nature. Mm-hmm. And I think if this conversation were more normal, then people would be like, oh wait, I can't necessarily do that,
Yeah.
Or I couldn't until I had some kind of mitigating factor. I think also, Amanda, I'm just going to say, I don't think you need to be scared of that photo that you're always a little nervous about. I think it's people are fine with cremated remains. Dead bodies, yes, but cremated remains, they're okay.
Yeah, I have it in my own personal records on my computer. It's in the slide deck along with the body trials, so I kind of associate them together.
I know.
I know.
Yeah. Oh, Chris, I love Krista's comment. The other Krista. That's we met each other we haven't met in person, but we met electronically, and now each of us refers to the other as the other Krista. So. So if I'm talking, I get to say the other Krista. But the other Krista says this about the big compost bin in the yard with loved ones' cremated remains, and that's the thing. It's that mixing
all together.
I wish. It's this fine balance. I never ever want to just seem like we're doing an infomercial. At the same time, it is so freaking important to get this information out, and so I'm always like really cagey about sort of too much product, as it were. But gosh, do you happen to have a picture handy of like the different sizes? Because if you do, just throw it up on the screen. It's just so cool, because like for a little pot, you can just have a little pot, right? And for the whole thing, you can have a much bigger thing. And your compost bin idea is not crazy, Krista. Yeah.
Yeah, and funny enough, you shared a story earlier, Krista, about about an experience you had when you were witnessing the open peer cremation before you went into the industry. And before I was even psychologically or emotionally open to these discussions, I was at a conference once, and I was in a group activity with another woman who was telling me about her experience when her parents passed away and they wanted their ashes blended together and then scattered in one of the provincial parks. And she was telling me, I do not think that what happened is what they envisioned, because it was me and my brother in a provincial park looking over our shoulders, making sure nobody saw us, because we didn't even know if it was legal.
Which it's not
With a
technically unless
giant
you ask for
salad
permission.
bowl, like
Yeah.
trying to dump them in a salad bowl, and they're like flying in the air and going in our mouths, and we're bawling our eyes out.
Yep.
And Lauren and I just, that memory comes to me a lot. And for my colleague Lauren and I, the idea of people having to celebrate their loved one's life while looking over their shoulder
Yeah.
and feeling like in their heart they're doing something wrong
It's
was
heartbreaking.
just not okay.
Yeah.
That's not where your focus should be. Your focus should be on their life and your memories. And
Which is, you know, this idea, like, I know it was a bit of an info session or whatever at that beautiful video that you shared, but that's why I love that, because it was like this dinner party scenario. Like, one of the things that I say around ceremony is that when I talk to people about their end of life, like their post-death plans, I often don't start with what do you want. I often start with what don't you want, right? And like, they don't want, like me, like I don't want any Enya, you know, and I really don't want the cucumber sandwiches, and I don't want, like, there's a bunch of stuff that we think I don't want a church basement. Those are things that I do not want. And actually, an astute friend could probably just pick up from my do nots what I actually do want. And I feel like this is just such an incredibly intrinsically important part of the ceremony piece. And that beautiful little video that you shared was so, like, a minute long, but when you got to the piece where people were just like, wow, look at this, and they were like putting their hands in the dirt, and they were putting the little sticks in, and they were putting the plants in, and I was like, oh my God, I could see that. I could see, like, a kindergarten teacher, for example, being, you know, like, having this become like a learning moment. I don't know, I'm getting way ahead of myself, but it's such a beautiful thing, as opposed to that salad bowl and the stuff going up the nose and being worried that you're in trouble somehow, you know?
Yeah. Thanks, Krista. And actually, it's really nice that you mentioned the kindergarten teacher, because one of the things my business partner and I are working on is a kit for parents to teach their children about grieving. And oftentimes it is with a pet,
like a little gerbil or something.
Yeah, so we have a critter kit, we call it, but we're actually developing a full activity kit with a planter and a placemat. And right now we're seeking a child grief therapist to work with to finalize our design. But
Amanda, you know you're stuck with me forever now, right? It's gonna be like a bug or something that's on you now. But I'm in. The work that like the vision and the dedication and this meeting people where they're at, it speaks so much to my ethic. And I know we're at almost 8:15. What I want to do is I want to ask if there are any specific, because we can hang, but what I want to ask, just out of courtesy, is, are there any specific questions that anyone has? Because if so, I just think it would be courteous to do that. Carolyn is fine. Carol, Andrea, okay, Krista. All right, it looks like we'll hang for another couple of minutes then, which is just fine. I like you guys spending this time with me, suffering through my, Charlie, I'm just gonna bring you on. You're gonna be like employee number 1, and you're gonna.
You did great. You handled it very well under the stressful circumstance. It wasn't like a printer situation like the other day. You did great.
And we resolved it with 2 minutes to spare.
Yeah, but you and I barely got to talk. We were supposed to be on at 6:30. I'm like, where is she?
And I'm one of these people who is very rarely on time, and I was on at 6:15 this time. I was like meditating, ready to go.
oh, Krista, when we're the two Kristas, when we're truly the famous morticians from the West Coast, we'll have this team on helping us out, making it all work for us somehow.
I want to be there.
Oh yeah. Oh, Charlie, you're going to be there too. Andrea, where are you from, Ms. Clark?
I'm actually in Ontario.
You are. Oh, you're staying up late for us.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep, I had a barbecue at the hospice where I'm volunteering earlier, and then I got home in time for this and realized, no, it's not 7 o'clock Ontario. I have 3 more hours.
Oh, that's awesome.
So
Krista, you're gonna have to put cross Canada time zones on your invites.
It's again with the Zoom thing. I ticked the button that said it would populate in anybody who registered. It would populate in their time zone. I honestly am trying. I'm not as bad as I look, but I am pretty bad. I will just put that.
I didn't
out
read it, so that part.
Oh, well, that's great. Do you know Awake's work, or was it just the Green Disposition?
No, it's the Green Disposition that I guess I'm following you, so I'm getting your emails.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Well, that's wonderful. Oh, Amanda, yeah, I'm so grateful for putting up with me tonight and with doing this for me. I'm gonna connect in with you so that I can get a small little piece to send out, because I was actually very happy. 50% tonight, which is better than the 30% that is quite standard for a free webinar. So we had like 50% of attendees here, and of the other 50%, I had a good solid number who wrote in and were like, oh, I'm sorry, this last minute thing happened, which I think is adorable, because they think that I'm their mom. And right,
You're
Charlie?
very maternal. Very.
That is true. Yes. More maternal than your average toaster, that's for sure. So. Oh, goodness. Well, every single one of you, I don't even know where Lauren is, but every single one of you has, as long as you're not allergic to cats, has a place to stay when you come here. Definitely stay connected. We've got some really, really cool things happening in the not too distant future. There's a bunch of new offerings coming, and some really great free Willow End of Life workshops that are going to be in person in Vancouver. But there's also some distant stuff, some Zoom stuff that's coming up too. So, but Krista, other Krista, if we did then you should just come over and you could stay with me. Okay, so that would be good. So well, my darlings, I will call it good night. Thank you
Good night,
for
everyone.
being here. I just can't thank you enough. It was just such a joy. And I even
Agreed.
remembered to record almost all of it, so that's a plus.
Lauren is responding to your call out. This is my business partner on the line, sitting in bed with her husband in pajamas.
Oh, hilarious. Oh, that's so nice.
I know.
Lauren, were you happy? Was it? Yeah. Oh, okay, good. Hope so. Good.
Very.
Okay, good. Krista, be in touch soon, okay? All right.
Bye, ladies.
Bye.
Bye.